Friday. Welcome to another episode of the Fireside Chat. I am Chronic Chris Page, back in the studio one more time, one more Friday, one more guest from the EFED world. Today's partner in crime, I know has done some stuff in action wrestling, has done some stuff in cult wrestling here lately, and I'm sure that his story is going to be very interesting and entertaining. He's Johnny Bacchus, man. What's up, brother? How are you?
What's going on, man? It's it's always funny you say Bratchus because it's Bacchus, and I always thought it was you in character calling him a brat and doing like a little pun thing. But oh man, this is how we're starting this out.
I don't even know why I put an R in your name for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so far off base right off rip. Go figure.
No, you're good, man. It's actually I thought one of the funnier ones because Bacchus is such a kind of a annoying little twit sometimes that I could see. I always thought Paige is dismissing him as a brat, which is very apropos.
Well, no, but I'll take it. This is the same with Brian Keto. I always add in an extra D in his last name, and somebody had asked me the other day. He was like, "Is that a rib at this point?" I was like, "Yeah," because I did it for so long.
It kind of reminds me of when Brock Lesnar in UFC when he was fighting Frank Mir, and he'd always just call him Frank Mir. Yeah. Because he knew that it pissed him off and got under his skin. So he just doubled down and just be like, Frank Mir can't take me, knowing that, we love it. We love fake or intentionally ruining someone's name in the lowest hanging fruit way possible just because it gets under their skin.
Well, I can remember Justin York. I did something with him in IIW last year, or mid-year last year, maybe second quarter. And the entire base of the role play, and we talked about it after the fact. I never referred to him by his name. I intentionally called him every other J name I could.
Okay.
And then when I ran out of J names, I went to his last name, and his last name was York. So any other last name with a Y or that rhymed with York, I would throw in. And when I did it, he got mad. He was mad at it. But then after the fact, it came to me, and he was like, "You just did that because you knew how I'd react, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, bud. There you go."
It's funny you mentioned him, too, because I've really wanted to work with Justin York, and I haven't had the chance to. It's like a mutual thing. But one of my plans was, since he goes, he's JD York, is I was just going to call him Jed the entire time.
Yep. Oh man, he would have fucking came at you on that.
Jed York. Yeah.
He's not a bad dude for the most part.
Nah, he's a great guy.
We had some issues, but we wrapped those up and tied those off. So.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, and do you know is he still going to be doing that tournament that he was kind of milling around in his mind or whatnot, that invitational thing? Because I hope he does. He invited me to it.
I believe so.
Cool.
But I don't know. We haven't discussed that. But to the best of my knowledge, I think that's still something he's trying to do.
I guess when we get more into the characters and stuff later down this conversation, maybe this is foreshadowing about my creative method, but I already theoretically have planned what I would write for all 4 rounds if I get that far in it. I'm way too obsessed about this stuff. But I'm very looking forward to it. So let's just call that a quick plug for if that's happening. And the only reason I don't know is because I haven't heard anything, I think, from him recently about it.
I know he's doing a last little loop is what he's working on. I think it's ending at the DPI here at the end of February. But I don't. Last I heard, it's still a thing. I hope it's still a thing because I know that Candace and I signed up for it, and we thought it'd be kind of funny that if we paired up opposite each other.
Yeah, no, that will be good. I've even joked that if I win, since he had the what's it called? He was offering that prize of a custom championship title. I manage a bar, and I will 100% put that on the wall of my bar, as a big trophy to tell everyone that I won a fake wrestling game online.
Talk about promotion, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's dive in, man. When did you start? What year did you get into the game? What possessed you?
Oh boy! So I've been e-fetting for probably almost 2 decades at this point, I want to say, obviously with some big breaks in the middle. I started my first ever e-fed. It was on a website called sdglive.com, smackdowngameslive.com. And I actually discovered it while looking for creator wrestler specs for SmackDown versus Raw and SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. I've always been like a pretty nerdy kid who's liked role playing games. I was like an MMO guy. I played City of Heroes and City of Villains, and I was on like the role playing servers for them, and which led to me getting my first and most regrettable tattoo, which is from that video game on my back, and I always forget it's there because I never have to see it, unlike my better tattoos. But so I started e-fetting there. I was always like in school the kind of guy who was really, really good at like acing like the reading and writing parts of like classwork, tests, etc. So and I always liked writing. I was always a creative little kid, and it was just a fun thing. I liked wrestling. Wrestling was how I made some of my first like close friends in middle school, was a mutual love of it. So started e-fetting. Did it until maybe like mid high school, I want to say. And then I dropped out of it. I didn't do it for a very long time. And it was actually when I went to college and I had moved out of state. I'm from California, but I went to the University of Nebraska for college. And I just needed something to do with my spare time that wasn't, going out and hitting bars or any of that kind of stuff. Like I'm a pretty sociable guy, but I definitely need my me time now and then, and my little outlets that, in this case, we're not writing term papers. So I started writing. I had literally just typed into Google best e-feds, I want to say, or top e-feds. And that is when I found WCF. Sorry, the very first, I always get confused because that first fed ever I was in was called XWF. It's not the same one. I'm sure there's a million XWFs out there. Sure. But so I found WCF. And my first character coming back was Howard Black. The Honey Badger Howard Black. That character was basically he was a just like a straightforward wrestler, submission specialist. He was a younger guy, married with a son, basically, who was wrestling to pay the bills. Kind of getting wrapped up in the world of everything like that. Played him for a long time. He's the character a lot of people who've known me for a while associate me with, which is why you'll hear people like Lissie, for instance, refer to me as Howie, even though my name is Michael. So played him. Eventually, getting done with school, wrapped up, kind of doing e-fetting stuff by the end of my college time. I was just like, you do it long enough and hard enough for a while, like you just kind of get burnt out. And especially WCF had for a long time no word limits, and it was kind of known that if you wanted to win, you had to write the long role plays, right? So you have too many nights of just like pounding coffee and churning out novellas that even you understand are of like kind of questionable quality, and you're just kind of doing like the Jean-Paul Sartre being and nothingness thing where you're just kind of writing in a fugue state and don't even remember much of it, but like, hey, I won the match. That by the time actually I won the title there with a different character that was not Howard Black, I was just totally burnt out. I was so burnt out I couldn't even defend the title after all this goddamn time trying to win it. WCF kind of collapsed and closed down for a number of reasons, which is such a long thing in its own that we don't even have the time to get into. But that community went over and became Action Wrestling. So I picked back up e-fetting when the pandemic started. I think we all needed something to do during that time of being locked in our homes. And I was actually trying to study for the sommelier exam, but you spend too many days in a row just staring at wine books and your brain just starts turning into like a flan pudding, that I was like, I need some kind of outlet. So I hit up like the Action Wrestling guys. Havoc, which is their Royal Rumble, was around the corner. And I was like, hey man, like, let me come back. I want to do Havoc. Let me be a surprise entrant, right? I'm like, I'll blow the dust off Howard Black. I'll do a year retirement tour where I just do like, I don't know, one match a month or something. We just make it like a little special attraction thing, yada yada, and then I can close the book on that character permanently. So I did that. It ended up not being that at all. I was by the end of it, I'd even like won a title. I'd won Wrestler of the Year as Howard Black through a tournament. But like I knew, I was like, okay, I have to. I started by coming back by saying Howard Black is retiring at the state. It undermines his story to not retire him there, especially because by this point Howard Black's story had kind of turned into this family drama about a man who kind of can't let go of the past and how it was affecting his relationships, kind of like what just happened to Tom Brady this last season, like losing him and his wife divorcing because he just couldn't stay retired essentially. So I knew, I'm like, okay, I have to retire Howie by the end of it, but how about I make another character so I can keep role playing? And that's where I created Johnny Bacchus from there. It was a really off the cuff character for me. I had always wanted to play kind of the brilliant but lazy archetype. I had tried in the cruiserweight division for Action Wrestling maybe like a year before then, and just like after 2 matches petered out because I just wasn't in the right headspace to role play. That was with a character called Jake Fogg, and he was kind of the proto Johnny Bacchus. It was an Orange Cassidy base picture, et cetera, et cetera. Came up with Bacchus, and basically the gist of the character, the conception of him when I started, was that he was this UC Berkeley dropout, this like kind of punk kid sleeping on couches, sleeping on a couch in an apartment with like 6 other people, who referred to it as a co-op or a commune, even though Johnny pointed out that was a ridiculous way to just characterize a 3-bedroom apartment shared by 6 people. A lot of it was like kind of riffs on the Bay Area, like the culture of the Bay Area, California, because that's where I was born and raised and loved very much. So Johnny was basically this kind of disaffected slacker who was supposed to be very smart. You don't just get a full ride scholarship to Berkeley, being dumb, right? But for reasons had dropped out. And then now during the pandemic was collecting unemployment insurance and needed something like to put down like job search history on his unemployment form. So he sent a job application into Action Wrestling and they hired him. And that was just supposed to be the start of how he started wrestling. Like he was literally like a fan who, as a tongue-in-cheek bit, did this and ended up being in there. And the early Johnny Bacchus was very characterized by kind of being this guy in the land of the giants. This was a, young, like I think he was 22 years old when I started coming in, who was like a fanboy of a bunch of these wrestlers, faces and heels alike, because he kind of was naive to it, right? He's, I've seen this cool heel on TV. I cheer for them. And then suddenly you're getting backstage and you're getting very disenchanted very fast, because suddenly you realize, oh, these aren't characters. These are like real people, essentially. My little fun blurring of the meta of e-fetting, right? Where like it's pro wrestling that's on TV, but you almost assume that, people, oh no, they're playing a character. But no, in our meta, that this is who they are. These are real people. It's not gimmicks and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So the character started darkening from there. But the character was very successful. And this is what was funny, was that even though he was effectively untrained, the idea was that he had always been a street fighter. He was, a militant lefty, the type who does like black bloc Antifa type stuff before this. So he knew how to hold his own in a scrap, basically. And just turned out to, by the way results go, be kind of this like ring IQ prodigy a little bit. So that was where the character kind of started out in the beginning. He was even more insufferable than people probably find Johnny to be right now. My early shoots as him are just characterized by references and wordplay stuffed in on each other. I was basically just kind of having fun and treating it almost like battle rap a little bit. Like, how many punch lines or play on words can I do in this while still making a cutting point? But where he from there sort of evolves, I guess, is, through these interactions and this disenchantment. And I've always appreciated, for me personally, when people can organically evolve their characters based on interactions. Like, that's what draws me to role playing, and having that rather than sticking to script. The way Johnny has evolved at this point is substantially different than he started or where I even intended him to go, to be perfectly honest. I did not see him dating Lissie Hope, for instance, right? And so I guess that's kind of the gist of the start of the character, if you will.
When did you and Lissie Hope, the character of Lissie Hope, when did you guys start talking about the relationship storyline?
So know what's funny? It just kind of happened. So when I was playing Johnny in those earlier days, Lissie Handler was not only playing Lissie Hope, she was playing May Ashby, who was, and this was right on the heels of the storyline of Lissie having her overdose and being out for a little bit. May Ashby was literally the president of the Lissie Hope fan club. And it was just kind of this side character NPC that Sean was playing. Actually, Johnny and May were initially the item, and Johnny and Lissie were never really supposed to be. But we kept having people kind of saying to us through the interactions, because like a big point of Johnny's early story was that he was this huge fan of Lissie Hope's. Like, she was his favorite wrestler before he came to Action Wrestling, right? And this was in the midst of Lissie being a heel. So she was like a total asshole to him, right? Like, she and him did not get along and were just openly antagonistic to each other, which is really funny to look at in retrospect. And that was a really kind of hard and frustrating time to actually play Johnny, because, Lissie and I, out of character, like, are each other's like favorite people to work with, essentially. But it was like I'd interact and we'd be trying to sell this story, and then people on eFed Twitter like, this is like Lissie is basically kicking puppies over in Action Wrestling, and I'm like out here being like, you kick puppies, Lissie Hope. And then I'd have like 4 Lissie stands or like guys who are like thirsty for Lissie coming into like the replies and being like, don't listen to him, Queen, he's just a hater. It's like, no, this is what she's doing, right? So the idea I had for a while, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, I always kind of at least speculate my storylines, like sometimes literally years in advance, or at least the general direction of the character. I had kind of seen That eventually I knew like Johnny and May were going to grow apart. I had thought it would be due to just Johnny being more and more successful and getting kind of wrapped up in the lifestyle of and that changing him and causing a rift with them. That's not what ended up happening. And I swear this is all roads are leading to the Lissie thing here. What ended up kind of happening was, without getting too deep in it, there was this story that myself, Lissie, Ashley Blake, who is, I cannot sing the praises of enough, is probably genuinely my best friend in this game out of character. I've hung out with them several times in person. If I have a moment, I will gush all about how much I love working with Ashley Blake. But yeah, so me, Ashley Blake, Lissie Hope, Carter Shaw, a couple other people over in Action Wrestling were working on this story called Philidor Holdings. And this was when Lissie was the heel here. Philidor was essentially on its face a financial holdings company that was sponsoring wrestlers to diversify its portfolio on its face. What Philidor Holdings really was, and Braceford, it was basically a Lovecraftian death cult. So, yeah.
Wow.
And all of these people in it, yeah, like they had these two hulking men. The base picks were literally Corporate Kane and Roman Reigns. But it was Peter Garvey and Samson Saltaire. They were called the HR department, and they were just these like kind of violent, enforcers. But it was like they weren't goons or lackeys. They were in the canon of Philidor, actually above everyone that was the part of the stable, within the corporate structure. And it was very strongly implied that Samson Saltaire specifically was not a man, but was maybe some kind of eldritch abomination in a skin suit, essentially. Like that he was perhaps Nyarlathotep, if you know who that is.
That's deep.
Yes. So Johnny ends up going to war with Philidor after kind of May Ashby, who was dragged into this by Lissie, kind of crosses the line with her own stable, and they send her to something called sensitivity training, which was more or less implied to be some kind of like torture, right, of some sort. Like I always saw it as kind of like CIA Black Ops style something, right? The point was that this left May Ashby scared and traumatized and running away. And Lissie couldn't kind of face the music of the blood on her own hands here. And this brought her and Johnny into like this extreme conflict, basically, right? Because there's nothing worse than your greatest hero failing you. Now, as all this stuff is kind of going on, again, we're getting, me and Sean, Lissie's handler, we're getting all these messages like, oh, there's so much tension between like Johnny and Lissie, yada, yada. And we had never actually intended any of that. And we just kept getting these messages. So when that story kind of wrapped up, the idea that I had and we had kind of pitched was this one where Johnny and May break up, and then like down the line or something, as Johnny's kind of having this downward spiral. One night while Lissie is like relapsing on, has been drinking tequila or something, her and Johnny like hook up, enter into this relationship where they realize kind of like it actually doesn't work, and they're just two lonely people trying to, just enjoying company. They're better friends. And then Johnny would decide to go back to May, and then this would roughly be the point when I would decide that to hang it up as Johnny, where he just retires, he goes back to school, etc. I thought I was going to be leaving the hobby for good, maybe about a year ago, I want to say it was, and I had joked with Sean like, we should just like pull the trigger, since Lissie always works best under like trauma or when she's heartbroken. She's kind of like Peter Parker, I think, and like Lissie is most interesting when she's suffering in some ways, kind of like, you know, how Spider-Man is always and Peter Parker is most interesting when things are bad in his life. Then I'm like, okay, maybe we have this like weird moment where like Lissie suddenly, when she finds out that Johnny's possibly leaving, like decides to get attached to him or something, and it's this thing that when he leaves, she can, you know, beat herself up over. And then I decide not to leave, but we'd already started this, though. Now, going on at this time, I have this storyline going on with Ashley Blake, who was the leader of the Philidor Holdings stable, right? Philidor is broken up at this point. And Ashley Blake, who has become, now that Philidor is gone and after their kind of dominance, becomes essentially the whipping girl of the entire Fed, right? Like, here's the big bad who has finally been brought down a peg. Everyone is lined up to tee off on Ashley Blake. Corey, the writer of Ashley, kind of doesn't know what to do with the character at this point. It was hyper specifically created for this Philidor storyline. As he joked, saying, what is there to do with Ashley afterwards? Well, if I was writing Philidor straightforward within how the group would have been, Ashley's fate would have been that they would have taken her out back and shot her for failure, right? But you can't do that. So we start this group called Insurgencia, and it is literally two people who were each other's worst enemies forming a tag team. Ashley comes to Johnny, who was, you know, the person who stood against Philidor, and like has this breakdown in front of him, and he kind of decides to sees that maybe she is just as much a victim of manipulation and brainwashing as any of the other people are, that she's actually this broken person. Starts doing this tag, decides to take her under his wing and kind of see if he can help Ash Blake wash the blood off her hands. And it is not well received by the entire Fed, right? Everyone calls Johnny a hypocrite, calls him a sellout. And the only person who actually, though, does look past it and tries to, and she's upset, she's angry at Lissie hates Ashley Blake, but the only one who tries to, rather than throwing Johnny under the bus as like a monster, is like more broken or heartbroken trying to figure out why, is Lissie. So from there, we just kind of like the Insurgencia had a feud with the Swallowing, which was Lissie's tag team, and they were the tag champions. We had this big feud, wrote this match, had at the end of it that it ended with this great moment where it's Lissie and Johnny in the ring, and it's the two of them are the only two standing, and they are just beating the crap out of each other. And then finally, you know, Johnny gets the upper hand, and he's wailing on her. He's so desperate to win this belt, and he stops and he looks down and sees like blood on his hands, right, from punching Lissie in the face, so desperate to win this belt. And it freaks him out. He like pulls his like fight gloves off, and then while doing that realizes he just transferred blood to his other hands, you know. Mm-hmm. And he like starts like sobbing and saying like, oh my god, I'm sorry, you know, right? And Lissie reaches up and like cups his cheek and says it's okay, and kisses him and says, do what you have to do. And then that's when he puts her down with his finisher, and we won the match and won the titles from there. And that was kind of where it's like, okay, let's just start the story off. All right, Lissie and Johnny are together. And then at that point, now Sean and I just joke that because we like working together, and actually it's more drama-free, we're like, fuck it. This is just like, this is the couple going forward, you know? Like, this is, not a it keeps our lives simpler by just having these two characters be together. So,
and it's like it's a relationship that's still going today, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what
yeah. So if anything, you got to kind of figure out how to innovate or whatnot, where you're going to take it. I mean, I'm kind of between worlds right now. I've just returned to Colt. I'll probably return to somewhere in the next couple months when my schedule gets to a point that I can take on an eFed that I can genuinely commit every other week or every week to being able to write, and do a work of the standard that I think is appropriate. But we'll see where I end up. I'll put it that way. And when it happens, then we'll see where Lissie and Johnny go from there.
I can tell you, like, with Candace and I, we don't have a plan.
Right.
We literally just go with the flow every day. And there are days that we'll interact. There are days that we don't. There are days that we pass messages back and forth on Discord all the time and via text throughout the day when she's got time and I'm around. But we have no plan. Like, we just kind of go with the flow. And when we do our down the rabbit holes, like, they're not rehearsed. They're literally us just bullshitting and trying to entertain ourselves and see how many times we can make each other laugh. And as record shows, I think I'm winning that race.
Hell yeah. And I think that, like, the real answer of always is somewhere in the middle, right? Like, as much as I'm a meticulous planner, like, you have to be able to improvise. You have to be able to adapt. You can't be too rigid on how things are going to go, because they will always not go the way you want in the end. And you better know how to, like, have things go on the fly, right? Like, you stick to the script, you just lose, I think, the kind of joie de vivre of role playing. At that point, you're just show running a little bit.
I always say it's good to have an outline, but always be ready to adjust and pivot when need be.
Definitely.
And I had several situations. The last one is the most notable to me, and it was in 2021. Sorry,
okay.
late 2020 into 2021. It was something with Thad Duke. It was just supposed to be a one-off, and it turned into a 6-month deal.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it blew off at a big pay-per-view at Snow Job 2021 for the Uni, and it was incredible. Like, it wasn't intended to be. We had this idea. He didn't want a belt. It was a TV title way back in the day, and but we worked out, like, all right, we'll do a ladder match so you don't have to take a fall, and I'll cuff you to the rope and climb up and get the belt. Well, then he turned around and beat us for the tag titles, and then he won the Uni, and we turned around and I beat him for the Uni. And it was all out of happy stance, right? And it was because we pivoted along the way, and you get some of your best shit when you do that.
You absolutely do, right? I mean, hell, that's like talking about the Lissie thing. Like, what's funny was, if you go back and read Lissie's stuff, because I'd been working with Sean as Lissie, but as Howard Black before I brought in Johnny. And you can see, actually, there's a lot of clues in Lissie's role plays that on this original idea we had of, like, this kind of teasing this romantic pairing between those two. And that went completely out the goddamn window. Right. You can't always, sometimes you'd be surprised how good things can go, or, like, the happenstance of something, if you just go with that flow. Okay, sorry, I'm having my morning coffee right now, and it's got me jittery.
Oh, you're fine, dude. I'm on joint number 2. And show number 3 for this day, as I shared with you off air. Yeah, but we started my day off.
You're an animal, man.
Well, I look at it like this: with these firesides, the more I can go ahead and get in the can now, is the less that I have to worry about in the future with other shows that I'm doing. And we shoot Ring Bell one night out of the week for 3 days, and then. It's a process. Thank God that I work with a really good crew that don't fuck up a lot, and I don't have to do a whole lot of editing.
Yeah, no, hell yeah, man.
It's good shit. Where do you see yourself in Colt? What's on your horizon there? You said you just made a return. I remember
Did. Yeah.
When Lissie and I did a little thing over there, excuse me, I think Johnny had a part in that, in her story.
Yes.
And then I knew you
Yeah.
did some stuff, and I don't know if when you left, but
Mm-hmm.
when's your first show back? And
This upcoming show is my first show back. So, and yeah, I left Colt around the same time I left Action Wrestling. My real life was becoming insanely busy. I was in negotiations to potentially buy the bar that I manage currently. And I had just been like, man, if I make this purchase, like, I'm not going to have time for e-fetting, right? Like, I've got a million other things that I have to worry about. And hell, sometimes even just as general manager, I'm like, okay, I can, do all this other stuff, run all these errands for this place, or I can, sit down and write. But so I'd left Colt. I feel bad because I no-showed this title match that I had, both me and my impromptu tag partner Johnny B. We were the tag champions, and we'd had some ideas we'd kicked around, but like he had gotten COVID. I had been on vacation with my fiance, like out of the country for a week. This and that, and then finally it's like 2 days before deadline, and we're like, oh Jesus, we have absolutely nothing. Like we've got some like rough bits and like gags that we have, like a sketch, but like Jesus Christ, none of us have any idea what we're doing. And I felt bad. I felt very unceremonious of me. I try to be a professional and these days and not no show if I don't have to. But like life comes and sneaks up on you. So I'd been talking to Cass for a while now, Casanova English, the Fed head of Colt, about wanting to return because once a month is like very, very doable for me right now. And he's been kicking around. He's been doing this story of this feud between Casanova English and the board of Colt, which are like this group of shadowy businessmen or magnates, perhaps politicians, whatever. They all wear masks. And this actually tied perfectly into what the story that I was telling in Action Wrestling before I left. So, Insurgencia, right? Ashley Blake, Johnny Bacchus. It was revealed right before we kind of dipped for both the reason that Ashley's player was finishing finals to, get their degree, basically, and did not have, and then had also started a full-time job after that, did not have time to really do stuff. I was leaving, but the big reveal had been that Insurgencia had decided that they were going to track down the board members of Philidor Holdings LLC, who since the stables collapse had kind of gone into hiding and were going to assassinate them, essentially. And that was like literally the last role play we wrote before was this big reveal before we both took our hiatuses. So when Cass is doing this storyline, I shot him a message and I'm like, hey, this is this thing I was doing, do we think that maybe there's some overlap between our stories that we could collaborate on this? Like, I'm about to return. Maybe Cass hires Johnny to look into these shadowy board members, and Johnny agrees because, him and Ashley, let's say, suspect that one of them is one of these Philidor Holdings board members that they're looking for, right? So they're in agreement. And I had planned already on kind of doing a story like this when I was in Colt. Like that was my headcanon. Johnny's motivation for joining Colt was that he suspected a board member was a Philidor guy. I'm very sad to say, I know we're on the future right now, but in the past, just because this is one of those lost ideas that I never did, if I had been around for the Super Saiyan pay-per-view in Tokyo, I had already planned that my role play was going to essentially be Johnny tracking one of these guys down, finding out that he goes to this one particular Japanese restaurant and orders fugu fish, which has to be prepared very specifically or it will kill you. And Johnny sneaking into the kitchen and intentionally sabotaging the dish to assassinate this man, basically, right? Like going in, understanding this restaurant will be closed down. The chef will be probably literally thrown in prison. I did research, and that has happened from chefs who have served bad fugu fish and killed someone. They will go to jail. But Johnny being like, ends justify the means, essentially. The character's darkening a little bit. He's becoming more militant and more hardline in completing his goals. So coming back to Cult right now, this works really well for us because Ashley and I really love working together. We're not going to be returning to action wrestling for reasons I really don't want to get into, but Insurgencia as a group kind of doesn't make sense out of without, like, in a random fed, it wouldn't make sense because of the context, right? This group is kind of pushed forward as a, I guess you could say, like, harbingers of, like, kind of retribution. These two people, whether it's Johnny dispensing of what he thinks is revolutionary justice, or Ash, who sees it as because she's this very religious person, seeing it as like divine retribution, for instance. But this kind of very vigilante, hard shade of gray good guys who are technically faces, but they're really not your standard baby face. They're fighting the heels at their own game, essentially. And it doesn't work throwing into a random fed because there's no personal stakes. But it does really work in Cult for us. So I don't know if Ashley is anywhere ready to come back or not. And by the time this drops, who knows? Maybe I've twisted their arm enough to come join me in Cult. But that is the big place I see things going for Cult, is us continuing Insurgencia over there. And if anything, any solo opportunities fall in my lap, like I've got this Cult Classic Championship opportunity here. I'm already doing my role play idea around in my head for it. Then, like, hey, that'd be cool, because I kind of see the upcoming year as my chance to kind of spread my wings, kind of show people in the larger EFED community who maybe know me, but just know me as, or like know Johnny as Lissie Hope's boyfriend, who shitposts on Twitter, but really know nothing else about the character, or even me as a writer, to see what I can do, basically. There's a lot of really, really excellent role players out there that I respect from afar, but have not had the chance to cross paths with, which I would love to earn their mutual respect. So,
well, who you got eyes on? Who do you want to do some things with that down the line?
I'd love to work with you, obviously.
Oh, we've talked about that. You're on your
own.
Oh
yeah, we have.
You're on a list to that I want to work with before I.
Don't I feel special? It's probably contrived, but for me to say this, but obviously, like, James and Atara Raven are two people I'd love to work with. The few times that James Raven came into action wrestling, I was actually very flattered that he name dropped me as a person who he'd like to fight in his, like, role plays, even if it was being like Johnny Bacchus has a punchable face, I'd like to do it. I'm like, he noticed me, so we'd love to tangle with James Raven. Love to work with JD York, obviously. Am working with Casanova English. Vodka Black has been someone that I've just loved going back and forth with on Twitter, so would love to do some stuff with them. And guys like Mac Bain, Buster Knuckles, a lot of these guys that I've seen their work, Todrick, people who I very much know and are clearly well known, but I sure have no idea who the fuck I am, essentially.
Toddy's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love the character. So love their style, the whole presentation and everything. It's funny, I don't even think I learned of Toddy at first through the context of like wrestling e-fedding. I think there was like some other thing going on in Fight NYC where they were like doing like a pseudo reality show or like a pseudo Big Brother thing. And that was like the first time I just clicked on it. It was just on my feed. And that was the first time I saw Toddy there. And I had just assumed all of these guys were just characters created for this like Big Brother style like thing. And I'm like, oh no, they're all wrestlers. Great. Okay. So yeah. There's so many insanely talented people in this community that there's probably even a bunch that I've just like seen in passing once that I know their name but don't know their work and would love to. I'm open to working with anyone, man. You know, I think anyone can make some cool shit happen. I'd even love to like work with some people I've worked with in the past. Again, like, you know, like Max Damon is one that always goes to my mind. Fucking love that guy. Just want to give it. Hi, Max. I don't know if you listen to this. Love you.
Yeah, Max has always been fun. We go back a lengthy period.
Yeah. Did you ever see the Twitter account for R Max Damon, his fans subreddit or whatever?
Yes.
Okay, so that's me, for those who don't know. And it came from actually me and Ashley Blake's handler. We were talking about if like this was all real, what the fandoms of each wrestler would be like online. And one that we got to Max. We're like, okay, no, he would have like, his fan community would be like quarantined by Reddit. It would be just like this hive of just like misanthropic like internet trolls. And we thought it was so funny. We're like, we should like ask Max and just like make the subreddit basically. So we hit Max's handler up like, yeah, do we have your permission to do this? He's like, not only do you have my permission, you have my absolute blessing. So and we created like a whole headcanon of it that like Max's fans refer to themselves as the quote losers and virgins because Max one time got drunk and did an impromptu AMA on his own subreddit where all he did was bully his own fans and call them losers and virgins. So they've taken it as a badge of honor. Yeah, I love that guy. He is so up for like he's such a good sport on shit, and him and I just like our senses of humor on a lot of stuff really like overlap and click with one another. Someday we'll have to me and him will have to explain the whole story of the sailor suit, for instance.
The sailor suit.
Yeah, I forget. I mean, I can just get into it now. It started out like, I think Max and Johnny are two characters who are just naturally antagonistic to each other, because especially early Johnny, when I came in, and Max, like, are just a little too similar of people, even if, like, Johnny is ultimately a good guy with a heart of gold, and Max is just a inveterate shithead. But that same kind of, you know, smirking swagger, you know, shit talker, same kind of like, yeah, take no shit, kind of space cowboy vibe. And we had gotten into it one day in character, and off the cuff, I had like said, like, I'll tell you what, Max, like, I'll fight you and I'll put my title on the line, but if you lose, you have to wear a little, for like the next month, you have to wear a little sailor suit and sing on the Good Ship Lollipop by Shirley Temple whenever I snap my fingers. And it became like this running bit where I'd be like, accept the sailor suit match, Max. Like, I will put on the line. If I lose, I will wear the sailor suit. And I will sing the Good Ship Lollipop whenever you snap your fingers. And then, like, I forget, like, I think it was Lissie made a Photoshop for me where he found, like, some, like early 1900s drawing of, like, a little boy with, like, blonde curls holding like a big comical pinwheel in a sailor suit, and we just photoshopped Max's face on it. And I would like reply to, like, it didn't matter what his post was about, I would just reply with that picture and be like, accept, coward. So, and then we did a segment when we were feuding where Max came out in the sailor suit to mock me. Like, he hadn't lost a match or anything, but just like came out like, is this what you want, Johnny? You know, just like waving his dick at me and shit like that, you know. And then I came out and we just like went back and forth at each other, and they threw a drink in my face, if I remember, or something. So, yeah.
Jesus Christ. Well, listen, I'm glad that wherever you're role playing at, whether it be cult or at an adventure down the line or wherever, at least you're writing somewhere that reflects the time that you can put in, because that's all that fucking matters.
Definitely, yeah. So I'm looking forward to coming back. I've needed a hobby. Don't get me wrong. Like I have my hobbies. I DM a Call of Cthulhu game for a group of my friends every week. But like, like there's obviously a big difference between like DMing a game, versus playing a game. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm effectively, the Fed head there. I don't get to be the one who enjoys himself and like develops a character. So I am missing that creative itch. And I think that's for a while why I was just much to my fiance's chagrin, just obsessed with Fallout New Vegas. And I was playing as Johnny Bacchus in it because it just allowed me to be like, all right, play a character, have some fun, role playing game. So yeah, no. And that's why I'm still around on eFed Twitter, even though I'm not in a Fed right now, just because I like keeping my role playing skills sharp, and I like interacting and living a character, having some fun being someone besides the manager of a tiki bar, right?
No doubt, and you can always drop a character development piece on any board whenever you need to or want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
What's the downside here? I'm not seeing one.
Definitely not. No. Well, the downside is if I'm gonna put some effort into something, I'd like to at least, see if I could win a match with it. So that's just gonna come down to when I have a little bit extra free time to do all this shit.
I feel you, man. I feel you. Before we wrap this one up, I always turn it over to you guys. If you got anything for me, you can ask me anything. I'm ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely. So let me start by asking you this. What is, and I know that this doesn't exist, but nonetheless, I'm like, what is to you a perfect role play?
There's no such thing.
Even I don't care if there's no such thing. If you gun to your head, what is a perfect role play?
I think what I view as real strong role plays are those that have the healthy balance of character development story with
Okay.
with match relevance
Mm-hmm.
and a seamless piece of trash talk. I don't
What
believe
do you? Okay, no, go on. Sorry,
I
I'm
don't
not trying to
believe
interrupt you.
in word counts per se. I think that
Okay.
that I know that I'm not a 2,000 word writer. Like I
Yeah.
understand that and I get that, or a 2,500 word writer at that, because I'm usually just getting out of my opening in 1,500 to 2,000 words.
Yeah. I think like four grand is about my sweet spot, I would say.
I mean, I think that's about fair. For I mean, I can cut down to 4. I have before.
Yeah. Hmm.
But I just have to, with me, I have to figure out what am I cutting? Am I going to cut trash or am I cutting story?
Right. Yeah.
And depending on where you're at, obviously determines that piece of it. But I think having all of that mixed in and blended in, and I don't know the right way to do that, right? Like, I mean, I have my way of doing it, and it works a good,
Yeah.
piece of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Definitely.
And with my pieces, I write them specifically. I kind of know what I want to do with my story for the week, and I work it all in. And let's say I'm double booked this particular week. Let's say I've got 2 role plays that are due in one Fed and 1 role play due elsewhere. I'll tell a 3-part story.
Yeah. Do you like include hyperlinks in the role plays
exactly,
to like?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Because you can't. I don't expect for people to read my shit, and I can't.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I can link people to it. It's up to that person if they choose to read it or not. And if because if people are going to attack your story, they kind of need to know the story.
Let me actually quickly, on the topic of links, give a shout out to one of my boys here, but this is a question for you. So one thing that Ashley Blake actually really turned me on to doing is in like the trash talk, is including hyperlinks of opponents' old role plays when she's referencing them as like I brought receipts thing. What do you think about that? Do you like that or not?
I don't. I mean, I don't think you should have to go that far.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think I've went far as like quoting a piece, like but
Yeah.
not the whole role play. Like I would quote
Okay.
a certain piece of context. And
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't done it in a hot minute, but the last
Yeah.
time I did it, I quoted a piece of context from from a role play several times
Mhm.
throughout the role play,
Yeah.
and used it as a way to spin the narrative of my side of that, while making that
Yeah.
side of it look pretty weak.
Mhm.
But I won't do like a whole role play.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna. I do rebuttal like in my pieces, but I try not to make them a focal point.
Mhm.
Um, how I write and how other people write are obviously different. If I'm doing multiple
Yeah.
pieces, then um, like I try and hit bullet points of trash talk, so I don't come back and I repeat myself and talk about the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Like I'll have 4 or 5 bullet points that I want to hit. Now, how many words I get out of those bullet points, I don't know. We'll see.
Mm.
We'll say 500 a piece. Well,
Okay.
I know that I've got about 3K of trash talk, so I need about 3K of
Yeah.
story to kind of counterbalance that out before I
Right.
have to
Right.
even worry about what's said about me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's my mentality. Of if I can get you to defend yourself,
Hmm.
I have no reason to defend me. Right? Like
Absolutely.
that's the psychological side of it.
Mhm. Another question I have for you here. This has been turning my mind. For the sake of, without getting into any of the drama or baggage, for the sake of in character development and role playing, do you think that Twitter is a good thing, a bad thing, or a totally neutral thing?
Um, I
And
mean,
this is not getting into the drama. This is purely just the
no, it's just
interacting with each other thing. Yeah.
well, I think to be perfectly honest, like I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of Twitter. I
Yeah.
wasn't on Twitter for years and years and years, and was kind of put onto it in 2019. Um,
Hmm.
I don't. I think that when you put too many people in one space,
Hmm.
that whether it's in character or not, somebody somewhere is going to blur a line, and when it's blurred, then all bets are off. So I
Yeah.
don't think that that world exists. As much
Yeah.
as I would love for it to exist,
Hmm.
um, but there's always going to be that. Oh, is that a shoot that you just threw in, or you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's just there's always going to be constant questions out there,
Mhm.
regardless, and that's just human
Yeah.
nature. So I would have to say like I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah.
And
It's hard because I want to like Twitter as a medium for role playing. I think that, that live role playing experience, it should be good, like on paper, for character development, fleshing out dynamics between people, etc. And I think the thing that is the hardest part for me is that like people don't, because it's still Twitter, and you want to feel a part of things, want to be part of a community, that like people who play, for instance, like heels, don't act like heels on Twitter very often, or very selectively, or people that are like friends with someone out of character don't want to be like mean to their buddies. That was one thing that was really hard for me when I was like feuding with Lissie, is that like I felt just utterly alienated from people because, Lissie is such a popular person on Twitter that it didn't matter that Lissie was this like monster heel. Like everyone was like mad at me for being mean to Lissie, or like we had joked when she was feuding with like Cypher, and Cypher is like chaotic evil, just piece of shit guy, but had a bunch of friends that like calling Cypher out, like just ended up like Lissie would tell me like, man, now I know how you feel, because like I'm like Lissie is totally justified in hating Cypher, but all these people are like Cypher apologists going as far as to get mad at Lissie for calling like Cypher out. And sometimes that what would I call it? Like inconsistency is, I think, what fails with Twitter sometimes, right? Like it's okay to, if you're a villain, to just wear the black hat, man. You know? And if you're a good guy, like maybe it's okay that your buddy who's the villain is wearing the black hat. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but again, it's the mentality of people and the people that you deal with, right? Like, I'm just keeping it real. I think that, I mean, I would love to be the Chris Page on Twitter that I want to be. But that's going to be really shunned upon, and not because I would say or do anything derogatory, but I know how to be a fucking dickbag heel. And no, you haven't seen it. Like nobody has, because I try to be selective, even with who I engage with. Because at this point, I mean, it's moot. There's going to be contingency.
These are all so built on trust, right?
Yeah, and again, people will always find ways to, take whatever is being done and make it mean something totally out, take it out of context and make it mean something that it does not.
Yeah.
And that's just a piece of things that we'll never get past, because it's just the day that everybody comes to terms and realizes that nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And you show me a perfect person, I'm going to show you a liar.
Right.
And B, that, while I would love to get along with everybody, and I'm sure that that's everybody's mentality, I know that there are going to be people out there that I am not going to get along with.
It's not possible.
Yeah,
right.
And if I don't, but I feel like where I'm different in some form or fashions is I don't have to spew hate.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also not going to sit back and let someone, continue to down me or continue to be negative towards me when you don't really have a just cause. And I know that doing a lot of podcasts, people get the wrong idea most of the time. Like, I do it because I
mean, that's podcasting, right? I used to do one for WCF with my buddy Chris. Shouts out to Joey Flash, who is not on EFED Twitter. He's actually out of the game right now. But one of the people who, when I first came back to EFEDing, really took me under his wing, became very close friends with. I am in his ear right now trying to get him to come back. So we will see about that. But him and I would do these podcasts for WCF, and I swear to God, it created this reputation for us, because we would just be kind of off the cuff, we'd be having a couple beers while we're doing these podcasts and everything like that. You loosen the tie a little bit, and then suddenly you said something that hurt someone's feelings or whatnot that you didn't even realize that was going to do that, right? Or
well, the truth is with me, I'm just going to focus on kind of what I like to do, and I like to do this. And as long as there are people out there that want to do it with me, then we're going to, we'll do it. And that should be the same for anybody. If you're passionate about something and you have a project that you want to do, go fucking do it. Don't wait for somebody to say, okay, go do it. Just do it and be done with it. Is there anything else?
I'll give you the last question here. Sure. So, who do you think I should want to work with when I come back? Give me some names. Give me some shout outs for some people.
All right, so you're a heel, correct? Or does it matter? Does it fucking matter? Because I've got plenty of people.
I don't think it matters. Johnny is a face. He's just a touch abrasive for a face. I always see that he's a guy with a pretty hardline moral compass, and he's pissed a lot of faces off by calling them out on their hypocrisy as much as heels, if not sometimes a little more, because he essentially holds them to a higher standard of heel than he does heels, right? Like someone like a Reagan Voorhees, Johnny's not going to bother calling her hypocrisy out, because Reagan Voorhees is, like Patrick Bateman, essentially. But a face, for instance, me and Spencer Adams, who is a very good buddy of mine out of character, had in character beef for a while, because Johnny was pointing out you are trying to put yourself as this shining paradigm of things. Here are where you are falling short of that, so you can either address your hypocrisies or do not posit yourself as that. And that pissed Spencer off in character, right? Like, because who the fuck is this guy, essentially? But yeah, I'm a face. Technically, maybe it's a cop out of it, but ultimately, I think Johnny's on the side of the Angels, is the way I see it. So that doesn't mean I wouldn't happily work with anyone. I think you have some really great face versus face feuds. I always love the one of, the old rugged veteran saying, like, you're a young little upstart, right? You need to learn your lesson. Whereas you have the new guy like, nah, I'm going to prove to you that I deserve respect, et cetera, right?
Well, obviously one of the first names that comes to mind is James Raven. If you haven't had an opportunity to do anything with him, that would be because he's just fun and he's low key.
Okay.
And we'll kind of, if you get something going, we'll just say, where do you want to do it and what's the word count and when does it due? I think Peter Vaughn is somebody that anybody should want to get in there with. I mean, he just took the World Series of Wrestling a couple of months ago.
Yeah, he's one of those guys whose names I've seen a bunch, but I don't know any of his work. And his name is always up there. I remember the first time I saw his name was like on a Denzel Porter list, I think, of like the top characters in e-fedding at the moment. And he was number one. And I was like, I've never even heard of this guy. Like, okay, time to like start maybe, and I still have not. I meant to be like, all right, time to start like creeping on this guy's stuff right now, but just haven't had the chance. So, okay, I'll take that recommendation.
You've got Sebastian Bryce. You've got Mark Flynn.
Is Sebastian Bryce, is that Seb or different Sebastian?
That's Seb.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I've talked with Seb. I've gone back and forth with him in character, exchanged some messages out of character. Another guy I'd really like to work with.
And the list kind of goes on and on. There's a lot of good fucking people that are out there. When Centurion gets back off the shelf and gets back into the game, if he gets back into the game, he's one to look at. Oh man, who else is out there? I mean, there's thousands of people in my head, and I can't think of a name right now. Anybody in CCPE, because they're just great. All those guys are.
Yeah.
They've done their work to establish themselves.
Yeah, and actually, as you say that now, I've got some. A wheel started turning in my head. This is something maybe when we're off air that we can kick back and forth at some point.
Sure. Let's see. I wish that you were around. Like, you're about 10 years too late for Rod Masayatome, because he's a beast of a writer. If you want a good shit talker, Joe Montori. And Paul Montori. I think both of those guys are really good shit talkers. If you're looking for a story, Thad Duke's probably one of the guys out there.
Yeah, I've been meaning to work with Thad. He's definitely on my list, and especially when I found out that he's actually very good buddies with Ashley Blake's handler. So I was like, all right, well that's a pretty stirring endorsement in my book. So I take Ashley Blake's opinion on people more seriously than like anyone else in this hobbies. So yeah.
I don't know if you've worked with Corey Black. I'd recommend working with him. Fun.
I've worked with Corey. I've known Corey Black for probably a decade at this point. I actually don't know if I have ever actually done anything necessarily with him, though, which is like so weird. He's always been on this level that I've never really had the chance to, like, through time or whatnot, get up to his level to be able to like work something with him. But oh my God, I would love to work with Corey Black. He is the nicest guy out of character. And he's just a phenomenal writer. I cannot speak highly enough about him. So.
There's anybody out there that's creating a name and rocking waves. Like, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on angled side of the equation, but,
angled is such a hard one for me, right? Like, I don't understand how angled works. You have to put a lot of trust into a booker's hand, and I feel like you're putting a lot of trust in a booker's hand. And like, for me, the biggest thing would be like does this booker understand my character? Basically, if I would be more likely to do something angled with like just a fresh character that doesn't have history, because I think more than anything I would worry about like, okay, this is out of character for Johnny, or like this characterizes my character. Whereas if I had, someone totally fresh, like I'm just going to roll with whatever you give me at that point, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, the experiences I've had were, well, I mean, I just kind of said, hey, can we use your platform to do this? And
yeah.
We're just going to supply you with everything.
Yeah.
and you just, there's not a whole lot that you have to do. I think that there's a lot of really good angled handlers out there that and that's kind of what I use some of the super shows for, is to kind of tell stories. That's the bigger platform. Which if you get a chance to get on one of those, I mean, they're fun to do. You put your work out there in front of just about anybody that who may not get a chance to see your work.
Definitely, yeah.
Fed heads alike that may not have had seen any of your stuff, and you expose your writing to a broader audience. That's kind of a win across the board, if you ask me.
Definitely, yeah.
So it's always good shit, though. It's ultimately, you. I feel like the hobby is what you make it.
100%, right? Very, very, very much so. Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate it. It's been good sitting down shooting the shit with you about
No, I appreciate you bringing me on here, man. This means a lot to me. I thank you very much for having me.
You got anything that you want to say to the people before we close out?
No. Thanks for listening, guys. Looking forward to working with you in the future. If you ever I don't know, you want to talk about anything, my DMs are basically always open. Always love bantering about like EFED game theory and crap like that. Always down to collaborate. Super open to cross-promotional stuff. And I don't know. I'll let your boy. Also, Ash, Blake, Lissie, love you too.
All right, guys. Well, this is a CCP podcast and production for Mr. Johnny Bacchus. I am Chris Page. Did I get it right?
Bacchus.
God damn it. Johnny Bacchus. I'm Chris Page. We're saying have a great weekend. And the Golden Girls will just tell you this.